You know, I genuinely miss when movies could actually scare me. As a huge horror fan, I've been exposed to a lot of creepy shit, and nowadays most horror movies can't even scare me anymore. I miss it is all. It's weird because when I think back to my childhood, being fearless was definitely not one of my qualities. Way back when, I couldn't even make it through a single horror movie. I vividly remember my siblings putting on Saw, and I just closed my eyes and plugged my ears throughout the whole thing. Why I didn't just leave the room, I don't know. The point is, it didn't take a lot to scare me back then, and I'm here to rank the things that once scared me. Don't expect any of these to be genuinely scary, though. Luckily for my younger self, I would usually have a sense for when creepy shit was gonna happen, and then I'd avoid it. But I couldn't avoid everything. Anyways, let's get into this. Let's get to know me a little better. As a kid, there were a lot of shows that I really shouldn't have been watching at my age. I chalk it up to having a pretty relaxed household. As a result, I was exposed to shows like Family Guy, Robot Chicken, and South Park. Now, I was used to hearing curse words at this point. Watching a ridiculous amount of South Park will make curse words sound pretty natural. But while watching South Park, there was one thing that I never got used to. The horrible, bloody violence. Yeah, this spot's just gonna go to the violence in South Park. Whenever I saw someone getting torn to shreds with intense gore, I would squint. I can't even really bring up a specific example, it's just a generally violent show. Much more so than the other shows I mentioned. Although Family Guy likes to come pretty close. The worst part is, nobody was ever fucking safe on this show. They'd kill kids all the time. In fact, a kid being killed was one of the early running gags. I did keep watching South Park, but I was always wary going into an episode. I guess if you want me to be more specific, I remember being pretty scared whenever Man Bear Pig or the Woodland Critters showed up. But currently, I don't have any problems with the gore. It's just part of the show. This ranks pretty low because most of the gore was played up for comedy, and I guess this was already a strange pick for the list, since it's just me pointing out that this show is violent. So let's move on. When it comes to the horrors beyond the television screen, I was pretty scared of the weather too. Thunderbolts and lightning were very, very frightening, but there was nothing scarier than tornadoes. It was always petrifying whenever I heard tornado warnings, with loud-ass sirens and the idea that if a tornado actually hit my house, I'd probably die. So having a pre-existing fear of tornadoes probably helped make the movie Twister a horror show. I only ever saw the first scene in Twister back then, with the dad being sucked into a tornado. After that, I couldn't watch anymore. The scene is intense, with a lot of screaming and loud noises. It reminded me of what happened during actual tornado warnings, and I guess that's where most of my fear came from with this scene. The rest of this movie is pretty standard though. I think it has something to do with these tornado chasers. The bad guys are only doing it for the money, so they deserve to die. They also act like tornadoes are sentient creatures. I don't know, it's been a while. Twister seems to be an otherwise unremarkable film, but it at least scared the shit out of a kid. You did that, Twister! Good job! One of my favorite movies to watch when I was younger was the 1984 classic, Ghostbusters. Even today, it's one of my favorite movies ever, somewhere in my top 10. This movie is hilarious, while also maintaining a sort of eerie tone to it. Like the brief scene where Ray and Winston are talking about their fears that the end of the world is coming. There's a real sense of foreboding in this scene. Of course, you don't really notice that kind of shit when you're a kid. You just like seeing Bill Murray be the fucking best, and you like to see cool ghosts fly around. But there was one scene that a kid like me couldn't ignore, and it was right at the beginning of the movie. See, the movie starts off in a library with a woman being stalked by a ghost until it jumps out at her. Now that scene itself was kinda scary, but it's not really what I'm talking about here. Once the Ghostbusters arrive to help this woman, they go through the previously messed up library and find the ghost. But they don't have any plan at all, and then I got my first ever jump scare.
Get her!
You know, the horror of the scene is a little negated nowadays with that groovy piano music. I guess I didn't hear that over the blood-curdling scream. Maybe they knew it was going to be a scary scene, so that's why they decided to make the Ghostbusters back off like a bunch of goofballs. Especially fucking Egon over there, he's just waddling back like a cartoon character. Nowadays, I think this scene is pretty hilarious. The part with Venkman getting pissed off that they had no plan when they actually found a ghost is great. I also like them setting up a joke later, with Ray suggesting that they just get her, and then Venkman suggests Ray just get her when they arrive at Gozer. This one isn't that high either. It's just a jump scare, really. I didn't have, like, horrible nightmares about the library ghost or anything. Though, whenever the movie came on, I would go somewhere else and wait until the scene finished up. So I guess it did affect me enough to result in that. Alright, we've gone over movies and TV so far, but I was also quite the gamer back then. Quite the gamer indeed. There were a couple video game moments that made me feel uneasy. In Sonic Adventure 2, there was that whole speech from Gerald Robotnik before he gets executed. That was pretty creepy when I was younger, but probably creepier now that I know he was about to be executed. Didn't put that together as a kid. I also remember Twilight Princess scaring the shit out of me whenever I saw this weird shit. I don't know what's happening here. I didn't play the game to get this far. I just walked in to watch my brother play it. Weird shit. But the video game moment that got me the most comes from the video game franchise I've played the most. Mario! I mean, who the hell is expecting anything creepy to happen in Mario? Oh dear God. Not Poltergeist! Yeah, it's mostly just lighthearted stuff in Mario. So, as a kid playing Mario 64, on the DS, I wasn't expecting jack shit when I entered the Boo Mansion. You probably know where this is going. I just want to know who's the funny fucking asshole who decided to put a red coin behind that piano. They knew any kid would fall for that. I made it a point to never go in that room again. I don't know why it got me so bad. It's really not a huge deal. Just a piano with teeth. Maybe I thought something like this would happen. I think it was just the loud noise combined with how unexpected it was. Also, I guess the piano having sharp teeth isn't something that delighted my younger self's brain. I think this is the entry on the list that currently scares me the least, but I was pretty fucking scared of it back then, so that warrants a higher spot. Obviously, I didn't become a horror fan overnight. It was gradual. I think it started because I was a fan of Goosebumps. I just generally enjoyed the books and especially the cheesy TV show. I don't think there was anything in Goosebumps that particularly traumatized me. However, I would come to know true horror after I graduated from Goosebumps to R.L. Stine's The Haunting Hour. The Haunting Hour was essentially Goosebumps if it actually wanted to be scary. I mean it, this show was not messing around. I think it's actually harder to find an episode where the heroes don't just die in the end. At least that's how I remember it. They weren't scared to have dark endings. There were a few episodes I could have had on this list. Scary Mary was their take on Bloody Mary, which already scared the hell out of me. Lily D was essentially an actually scary version of Slappy. Although, for the record, that makes her a lot less fun than the Living Dummy. And the Scarecrow episode had a chilling ending where the entire world gets turned into scarecrows, ending the world with not a bang, but with a whimper. There was also an episode called The Dream Catcher, where this spider bitch is killing you in your dreams like old Freddy Krueger. Thankfully, they decided not to kill our heroes at the end of this episode. But they did want to kill someone, so they just left the bitch character in the dust to get fucking eaten.
Awake! If you were awake, I wouldn't be here.
Oh, this is fun. I'm having fun. But if I want to talk about the episode that scared me the most at that age, it would have to be Big Yellow. On the outside, this shouldn't seem like such a big deal. It's just a kinda dopey looking mascot costume. But you can really feel the aggressiveness coming from this guy. He never talks, he just kinda shuffles around and eventually gets pissed off when the kids want to fire him to get a better mascot. I think the thing that got me about this episode was, of course, the ending. I was still relatively new to The Haunting Hour, so I was expecting a more typical good guy beats the bad guy ending. Instead, Big Yellow eats our protagonist, and we get to see him slowly suffocating in there as he tries to call his friend for help, but then his phone just dies. The show came out when I was like 9, so this is probably the most recent entry on the list. And I still think The Haunting Hour can be pretty effective in certain episodes. I genuinely recommend it. While we're on the topic of gateway horror, I have a pretty interesting history with Poltergeist. I'm pretty sure I actually saw the Family Guy episode that spoofed Poltergeist first. Even in the form of a parody, I thought some of the stuff in that episode was scary. I guess it actually does capture the tone of the original movie in a few scenes. Also, the Carrot Top bit was hilarious. God, I miss old Family Guy. Anyways, I eventually saw the actual Poltergeist, and whoever is putting this on the same level as Goosebumps is out of their goddamn mind. This shit is way scarier. I mean, yeah, Steven Spielberg produced it, but Tobe Hooper was the director. That's the same guy who directed Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Where do I begin? There's a lot of shit in this movie that creeped me out. The clown, fuck off. The tree, the static television. Like, I actually got scared of static because of this movie. I also just got creeped out by the eerie music and the weird ways they talk about the afterlife. But I think the scariest thing in this movie is the part that feels the most like a slasher movie. That being when the dude rips his face off in the mirror. Fucking hell. I should not have been watching this. Nowadays, I really like Poltergeist, and it's a top-tier ghost movie. But back then, I was way too scared to appreciate it. I miss video rental stores. It was always fun when the family got together and picked out movies for family movie night. I have a lot of fond memories of these sorts of establishments. But also, I recently watched The Last Blockbuster, and now I have an irrational hatred for Blockbuster. That movie is so cringy. I want The Last Blockbuster to burn down, that's what I want. But anyways, this entry is not about my fear of terrible documentaries. See, whenever you're browsing for movies, you can stumble across all sorts of weird DVD covers, and I like to look at them. Which really bit me in the ass when I would stumble into the horror section. There were a ton of creepy horror covers I came across. I remember being pretty freaked out with the mini-series of It. Just old Pennywise with his fucking claw hands. I'm pretty sure this cover, as well as the cover for Twisted Metal on the PS3, gave me a childhood fear of clowns for a bit. I also remember being pretty terrified of the Fright Night cover. Look at that fucking witch in the clouds. What is that? I've actually been meaning to eventually watch that movie. It seems like it would be right up my alley.
Here's dinners in the oven.
Fuck yes, I want to see the context behind that. Those are the covers I remember scaring me the most, and I'm pretty sure I learned my lesson because I proceeded to avoid the horror section, and if I had to go through it, I would make a conscious effort not to look at any of the movies. Fucking Jaws. I hated Jaws growing up. I think this movie just gave me a general fear of sharks, and it actually did that for a lot of people. I don't recall ever getting past the first scene in this movie with the girl getting eaten. I was out after that. And I just carried that fear of sharks with me whenever I went out to the lake or anything. I was too stupid to realize that sharks aren't in lakes, nor are they in swimming pools or the toilet. Yes, the toilet thing was real. I mean, what if the shark got real small and stuck its way in there? I really don't have a ton to say about this. A lot of people got scared because of Jaws. It's a great movie, and maybe if I had seen the third one with the ridiculous 3D effects, I would have been less scared. Here's one that doesn't actually originate from a movie I watched or a video game I played. Instead, this nostalgic terror comes from a ritual. It's a ritual that I'm sure you're all familiar with. Let's give it up for Bloody Mary! When I was younger, my siblings wanted to try this out multiple times, and I was never down for it. In case you're uneducated, the ritual works like this. Go into the bathroom alone, turn off the lights, and stare into the mirror and say Bloody Mary 3 times. What was your reward if this ritual worked? Bloody Mary just claws your eyes out!
I love this plan! I'm excited to be a part of it! Let's do it!
I think people have added a few rules, like there's supposed to be a candle, or you're supposed to turn around 3 times. I don't know, I never did that stuff. I tried to do it, but I always stopped myself after the second Bloody Mary. I was just like, hey, what if she actually does show up and murder me? Why risk it? I think what made Bloody Mary so scary to a young me was that, unlike the other terrors of this list, the idea here was to tempt fate and maybe get actually killed by a ghost. I hadn't separated fantasy from reality yet, so it seemed like a very real possibility. My fear of the ritual also made me scared of any bit of media involving something similar. Like, I remember they do Bloody Mary in one of the Paranormal Activity movies, and as I said before, it happened in Haunting Hour. I also saw it on Supernatural, and yes, there was even a variation on South Park. Unfortunately, I stopped believing in ghosts eventually, and now there's nothing that scary about Bloody Mary. Though, I still respect the ritual, and I wanted to give it some love. So it's all the way up here. But what scared me the most as a child? Well, before that, I'm gonna give a special honorable mention to the Maze game and its goddamn Reagan jump scare. Fuck you, whoever made that game! You're a fucking asshole! Also the Paranormal Activity movies, the Ghostface mask, and those haunted mazes that pop up around Halloween. All very scary for a young Max. But what messed me up the most? Well, it just so happens to come from the first horror movie I ever saw, A Nightmare on Elm Street. Yep, Freddy was my first, and I've remained loyal to the franchise ever since. I only ended up watching it because my mom was about to watch it, and I decided I wanted to finally watch a horror movie in full. I guess I was getting pretty self-conscious about being a coward. I actually managed to get through most of the movie okay, which is surprising to me now. I think the scariest moment actually is the beginning with Tina's death, dancing on the ceiling and all. But, as I remember it, the scariest moment was actually the bed kill. I don't know what it is, man. I guess I just really wasn't expecting a geyser of blood to shoot out. This scene really stuck with me afterwards. I had nightmares about this scene, which seems very fitting. The idea that I could be sucked into my own bed and that's just it was terrifying. And the whole concept of Freddy Krueger to begin with was terrifying. Like, there's nothing you can do about him. You have to sleep eventually, and obviously nobody would believe you if you said there was a guy that was killing you in your dreams. You're just kinda fucked. You can't even be saved by your power fantasies, according to the third film.
Sorry, kid. I don't believe in fairy tales.
Currently, well, Freddy Krueger shares a slot with Chucky as my favorite horror villain. Still can't choose between those guys. I mean, Freddy got me into horror, but Chucky is the one that brought me back. Back on topic. I really love the Elm Street franchise, and as I said, if it weren't for me buckling down and watching this movie in full, maybe I would have never really gotten into horror. Because honestly, not too long after this experience, I started to get interested in Goosebumps and other child-friendly horror. I feel like Freddy might be the reason, because as scared as I was of that movie, there was something a little fun about being scared. I owe it to you, Fred! Horror movies are my obsession now, and I'm pretty happy to have that. You know what? Next week I'll rank the Elm Street movies. I'm feeling sentimental. So those are the scariest things I had to put up with as a kid. What movies and shows scarred you as a child? Comment about it if you'd like. Until next time!